My name is Amine, Chigani, hopefully it's easy to pronounce. Today I'll talk about maturing Agile teams through architecture principles. Before I get to the talk, everyone here has to talk about their employer, so I'll have to go through the slides. And the reason is that not a lot of people identify GE with software. Back in 2011, I think we decided to change that, and over $1 billion investment was made to make software or elevate software as a horizontal capability within the company, alongside with aviation, transportation, healthcare, power generation, and so on. So we're located in Silicon Valley. We've moved from 0 to over 1,200 software professionals, in addition to the 14,000 software professionals that we have within the businesses. Two, I think, remarkable, or a highly marketed accomplishment thus far was the founding of the Industrial Internet Consortium that moved a year later boasts over 160 members worldwide. So the Industrial Internet movement, which is our version of the IoT, is gaining a lot of momentum, and that's what we do at GE Software. The second thing is the Predix platform, which we've spent billions of dollars on building. We are announcing that we're going to make it available to the world at the end of this year. So this is my company. Probably you're familiar with this. If you have multiple verticals, you build your platforms, your applications to do asset optimization, operations optimization, all that cool stuff. And everybody does it their own way, although they report to the same. I think this is where we are today. We have a platform that we said is going to be that common theme between 300,000 employee company and their customers. And then we're going to have teams that are going to build industrial internet applications that leveraging the reuse at that scale. All right, so back to my talk. Like I said, I am an architect. I work for different businesses. Last year, I worked for the CTO office for GE Transportation. That means that I have CTO office that has a team, and they're focused on the transportation business, building locomotives. This year, I'm doing aviation, so I'm focused on jet engines. The context of this is basically the GE Transportation work that I've done. I think it's becoming a theme, how we bridge, I think, architecture and Agile, or even more architecture and code. And hopefully what I'll talk about is some of the experiences and efforts that we had to go through last year to begin to bridge that gap. So I'll see if I can make connections to the talks you've been hearing in SATURN. Not necessarily lessons learned, but some parting thoughts and conclusions that I think would resonate with you guys since you decided to come here. All right, so back in January of 2014, I was very lucky enough to say we have a team. One of the newest teams was at GE Transportation, over 50 engineers working on developing applications for the GE Transportation, and those applications range from NTI, new technology introductions, so we're looking at some data, some analytics, and we're just experimenting with it, to building industrial applications that will integrate with the legacy applications that GE Transportation has. So we had 7 to 9 teams concurrently working with the GE Transportation customers. So I was assigned to that team. GE Transportation builds locomotives, the things that hauls the train. A 100-year-old market leader in classroads. It's got some dominance in the industry. Several $1 billion of backlog. So when we sell those locomotives, we sell contract service agreements, material service agreements, and we guarantee that they'll work the way they work. And then when we bring them to the shop to service them, we also guarantee that we have to make sure that we say, this is what you need to do to the locomotive to be hauled. This is how much it's going to cost you. And the entire supply chain, maintenance management, these are all industrial applications that you have to build to make sure you can deliver quality of service and keep the margins where they need to be. From a software perspective, we build a software center. Of course, it has to be an Agile development shop. It is. The methodology, the way I would describe it, is XP/Scrum/Six Sigma. This is GE, Big Six Sigma. So there are flavors of Six Sigma in there. Very heavy focus on numerical metrics, and it's very difficult to match that with architecture. That particular team was new. The way we engage with the customer is they come to the center, they think we're doing great things, and they say, here is investment. We want you to do this and this. So as the money goes, the teams grow. So the teams grow organically or inorganically. One glaring thing that I saw in the team coming in was rigorless architecture, and it goes with Agile, or no architecture at all. So my objective was to work with the team, standardize on achieving quality within the time and the resources that the businesses negotiate with us. And that should be across teams, across projects, and across product releases. So for me, coming from an architecture background, heavily influenced by the ACI, I've always believed that you take whatever in the book, ACI book, and you have to make it work, because it's not going to work out of the book or out of the box. And I've always done that. This was just another thing. Now, these are Agile teams. No one does architecture, but then how do you make the architecture? And I just come up with this term, how do you make the architecture in the head of the developer? Because that's all you have. You have architecture that needs to be done. You have a team that is made up of developers. They do different roles within the team, but that's all it is. So regardless of the methodology, I've always believed that from a value proposition, quality and architecture are two faces of the same coin. So for me, I'm an architect coming in. The team realizes they have quality issues, and I had to make this as the principle of how we're going to work for the year. If you want to talk about quality, you have to talk about architecture. So I'm not bringing 700-page document of architecture, but we're going to bring in architecture principle into the teams so we can make sure we have quality. So that was basically the agreement we made. And that is basically what got to, we focus on functional. That's how we talk to the customer. That's what we sell the customer. That's how we plan the project. Architecture is about the structural, non-functional, cross-cutting concerns. So we really have to get these concepts as part of how we do planning, as part of how we talk to the customers, and as part of how we story and do backlog and so on. So those are basically the value proposition. The first thing I've done is I took a fight with the rest of the center on how we make sure that these structural concerns make it to the process itself. This XP Scrum / Six Sigma process. How do we begin to And two things that, at least for my team, I introduced was the integration strategy discussion here, test planning and design planning, and then the technical acceptance. All technical architecture discussions that need to be had as we engage with the customer, as we develop for the sprint, and as we plan for the release. Integration strategy, because legacy customer, life goes on, and you build new things to add to it. So if we're not going to do integration architecture, which we can discuss many things from performance, maintainability, integration, and so on, there's going to be no scoping, there's going to be no release planning. There's going to be no commitment to this amount of dollars, this amount of developers to this release. And at the same time, at the sprint level, when we talk about architecture values, architecture goals, we have to make sure that we can assess them. So as we do design or analysis for the sprint, this is what we're going to do. So we pull in functional requirements from the backlog. We talk about how we're going to design them as a team. It could be half an hour, it could be on a napkin, but that is architecture discussion that we said we have to have this test planning. How this is going to clear our definition of done, and I'll talk about it later. And the definition of done included architectural concerns there. And then finally, at the story level, and this is where it comes to putting architecture at the developer's head, how do you do the technical acceptance where you ask, okay, the story is done, how this is going to impact performance, security, maintainability, and other things that are architectural in nature. So I think this is, and we established, I think each team or each program had an Agile coach. I think I found them to be very, very supportive because their goal is quality and speed. And then you had to, as a team, I said, well, I need also structural integrity of the system that I can actually maintain and evolve later. So definitions of ready is something that we added, and definition of done. So before you start something, are you ready? And then when you're done, there is a clear definition of done. This was the easy thing. I did not do a quality attributes workshop, but remember that my customer is a legacy, old, structured customer. So they do PRDs, they do waterfall. When I said we have to really do workout to work on the quality attributes that are key to you and your customers, and they said, oh, hallelujah, we can do that. So the biggest supporter was the customer themselves. I did not, like I said, you can't do a quality attributes workshop until you have $80,000 for travel and all that to do it. But you figure out a way to make sure of how you come up with your quality attributes. So that's one, and you agree on them, you prioritize them. But the next thing is, how do you make them livable to the developer? So here is a simple artifact. I call it the quality matrix or a total quality matrix, where we say this is very important to the application, to the program. So security and compliance, but then what is the measurement that we need to use? So the developer, the project lead, the SDM or the software development manager need to know what it means, so we can assess for it as part of the definition of done, and we say we're done. So I'll just give a few examples here, and this is for you to read later. So security, we have organizational structure of what type of tests from security you need to do. Penetration testing, for example, gray box testing, the static code analysis. So at what point they need to be done, and so basically that was the indicator. And the measurement is to identify points where you look at those reports, you look at those results, and then you have to make a decision about which ones to fix and how you clear. So the targets, you can't have any blocker, security violation, or a major one, blocker or critical. The rest, let's have a discussion about it. And that's when we start doing the trade-off. I think performance, I did not have necessarily a very generous, I had actually a very generous SLA. I remember we're doing integration, very old system versus a newer application, different technology stack. But at least we were able to develop that SLA that every time you did your performance testing, you knew your target. So that's performance, and we've used scenarios that were very, very useful in describing if you are a shop personnel and using this application, using this part of the application, which we know interacts with the most old legacy system, you have a very generous SLA that is acceptable. Generous means it's not under sub-seconds. But it's realistic. It's one that the customers agrees on that we can live with, versus anything that is new, it has to be under sub-seconds. So the SLA described the different scenarios within, this particular functionality can go into multiple seconds versus sub-seconds and so on. Functionality, we made very clear that functionality, because it's very dear and heart for any Agile team, is only one piece of that quality matrix. We have all the functionality, search, click here and click there, and then are they work the way they're supposed to work? So is it there, and is it complete? Is it implemented properly? And then we said this is the quality matrix, it's functionality, but that's only one piece, and we put it in the middle. I put it in the middle, and I've always highlighted this. It's only one piece of all of this, So I think testing, integration, of course, deployability, and I'll talk about how we made sure that we were able to get the developers to go through this per team and then fill out this status, where we are at any point in time. If you want to do a review, you want to do a presentation to the customer, presentation to the leadership within the center, you can tell where the particular project is in terms of quality. Everybody's talking about infrastructure and automation, and probably this is already realized. I think Google says they don't have process. When you look at it, if you reverse engineer, their automation is a process. They just took the process that we have on paper and they put it in the automation. So that's very clear. So what we started from is, like I said, you engage with the customer, you have investment, and you start building team around that investment. So you're going to have that organic teams being built. Teams being built around applications that will hopefully in 3 and 6 months and 9 months, how we work in 3 months increments for deliverable, that we're going to deliver value to the customer. Now, all of these eventually are basically one big, gigantic system that provides value to the customer. So you build your own environment, somehow you get your quality assurance environment, but it's all in parallel. And there is absolutely no end of sight of how this will integrate as you do development. We're going to worry about that when we get to release. So automation was a big piece of how we can bring in integration issues, bring in the gap between the value to the user into development. You can't say you're done until a user is using your application and is gaining that value you promised. Other than that, we are still in development. And I think that's where automation becomes very critical. So two effort that took a while, and I know we just collapsed boxes, but you know how you build infrastructure and automate it. It's not an easy thing, and it's not like a developer can do that. You have to bring in new skills into the teams to be able to do this. So we force integration as soon as on a daily basis. Not on a sprint, not on a daily basis, that your application, as you check in, it has to, when you do your regression testing, your acceptance testing, it has already been integrated with the rest of the team, and these are multiple teams. And whatever copy we have from the legacy is already here on a daily basis. So this is your active development and testing that you're integrating, and you're seeing that whether your things break others or not. And we connected that with, this is our internal cluster for development, and eventually things will live and breathe and then be operated on our commercial cloud. And we brought that continuous to all the way to an integration environment that looks exactly like staging. So I keep clicking on the wrong, every sprint you have, when you say I am done, you're done in a context of a staging environment that looks like how this is going to be used. So when you say I'm going to take this from the backlog, I'm going to add it, I'm going to test it, I'm going to do my regression, and then the product owner is going to do the user acceptance at the end of the sprint, they're going to accept something that eventually can hop very quickly from stage to production. And that was fully automated process, and it's not necessarily an easy thing. So we have our legacy system, we have a legacy team, continue to operate that system on a daily and whatever cadence they have. And we're adding new pieces. And this environment is what got us that visibility. So now visibility is not easy. You need, I can go through this, but automation is very key. You can do this, you can do it manually, right? You can go from one environment to the other manually. So you have a particular builder and release engineer, and they always click. So I'm done. Can you click on the right folders and then transform the files from one file system to the other? This is we didn't have inside the team. So I brought in one of my colleagues, and then we hired build and release engineers. So I mean, if you're going to have an Agile team, and you think that you can hire a developer that says full stack, yeah, I think that you can say full stack, but I think if you ever done development in full stack doesn't, I find it very difficult to do. So I think bringing in build and release engineers who were shared resources between the different teams I've worked with helps us redo the automation. So I think besides the names here, which is basically a suite of products that we have Altasian suites of products for Agile development. But you go from development to a repository, and then this is what I'm interested in, the plan. So you get to a repository, and every time you check in code, you run your integration or your build. For us, we had web apps mostly. We do the UI and the server code differently because teams kind of seem to kind of aggregate our front-end developers, back-end developers. But if you consider these two as one, every time you check in code, there is build and there is regression testing through your unit test. Every 3 hours, we integrate the application, and then we'll run smoke tests, which are both the unit test and the functional test, or what Simon called the services test, or the non-unit test, the poking at the application from the UI every 3 hours. And then at night, you, again, pull the same binaries, and you take the entire system, and you run your suite. It may take 2 hours, take 1 hour. And it usually used to take 4 hours until we switched to a protractor, which is a Java-based, which is a JavaScript-based Selenium, and it runs faster. I think we moved from 4 hours to a few minutes. And then finally, you do your code analysis. So every time you check in code, a bunch of things happen, from code analysis to build to integration and to end-to-end testing. And that can happen every single day as you do development. So this gives you that speed, but it gives you the transparency. So every team would have a screen like this. It would have their application with all the metrics on it. And red is bad. So you see something red, it means that this breaks, this breaks, this breaks, this breaks, or that broke. That's what it means. And then you'll have stop everything and have a conversation about it. So then you can do architecture. So having infrastructure, having laid out to the developer what it means to achieve that architecture, then yeah, you can put any architect here, and you can build any diagram, any color, any shade, and hopefully that infrastructure, the skill sets that you have, the process that you institutionalize can get you here. So I did some of this architecture work, and other colleagues did architecture work for the application, but this wasn't going to be possible to actually achieve, to really match it to the code, match it to the application, if you don't address what I talked about before. So yeah, in Sun we've had our architecture framework. You do the logical view, the technology stack, security, and you do the deployment. So these are 4 must-have views, very known within the center. You do those, but those could stay in that PowerPoint or Visio if you don't have the infrastructure for them. This is code-centric, and that's what I told Simon. I wish I heard his talk, I think, last year. So we took, I personally looked at a 20-page document of code in style. And I said, well, hell with it. I don't think anybody looks at it. So we put 1 page of this if we can consistently code in the same manner. So we can actually move teams and actually have your code. I was like, can I make less than 10 major titles or major paragraph titles that really can make a team's code look consistent? Everything else will fall after that. So from a maintainability perspective, you want to have a modular architecture. You want to have good documentation, but you want to have also good coding standards or consistent coding standards. This cannot be done without the skill set. So I'll start with QA and build and release. So at some point, because I've inherited some legacy that didn't have a lot of testing, so we had to bring in quality engineers, or we have to transform some of the developers to say, well, you're going to be the toll gate for quality for this particular team. So why don't we look at the test plan that we've designed with all the edge cases, and then we start paying some of that debt. Some of the teams, they had debt, so we needed quality engineers to come in and focus only on that. Take an application and do reversed architecting. How can I break it? How can I test it? How can I? So this is very, very critical. I know you could, like I said, a full stack developer, you're responsible for every single thing you do. So that's Google. So you get the responsibility, the skill set, and then you give them that freedom to do whatever they, absent of that, you have to kind of compensate. And a lot of times, architecture is not about silver bullets, it's about kind of making things work. So the second one is build and release engineer capability. If you have a developer who's very good at infrastructure, absence of a DevOps organization, then you need to have someone who does this. Everything you need to do that is going to be done on a weekly basis or a sprint basis or a release basis, it's too late, too long. If you automate it, you can do it on an hourly or by a daily basis, and that gives you more value, more visibility. Product owners and subject matter experts, because this was more of a consulting, and probably you can speak to that more than I do, when you have a domain that you don't know, you're a software professional, and you have the people who are using your application are not software folks. So you bring in a product owner, so hopefully that's from the customer. A lot of times what they get you a subject matter expert. And they'll tell you, no, this is how my users will use the application. They do product portfolio, road mapping, and that is one piece of the responsibility. The second one is they are decision makers. And if you work in an Agile team where you have to commit, especially as an architect, you have to commit to certain deliverables, then that also involves resources and commitment to money. So when they say, oh, I like it in blue, and you commit to it, if you have to do it in red, that's extra work, which is basically a new feature. So they are making a decision that impacts budget. So when they say blue, it's going to be blue. If they want it in red, which is fine. We can do it. We can refactor and do it, but it's going to cost more. So something else needs to go from the backlog. So this was very, very critical. We had product owners who just loved the teams. And they say something, the teams make it up. And they thought that comes for free. So we have to kind of compensate that you make a decision and you're going to live with it. And if you need it in other shape, we can do it. Something else is going to give. There is only this amount of time, this amount of money to spend. For the legacy or for the integration, I basically had the customer to hire and assign an IT subject matter expert that owns the legacy to sprint with the team. With each application, they would have someone from the legacy system sprinting with them, saying as they pick which one, they said this related to 20 touch points. So when you want to do testing, well, you better test 20 times those features, edge cases. Otherwise, you're building a very shiny app that will never integrate. And that's basically breaking the value to the user, which was established as you're not done until a user is using it and getting the business value out of it. And then finally, code reviews. I think this is something that from a process you can do. You can say, Rick will build it, I'll review it. You can let the team do it however they want. So I think 2 people are responsible for any piece of code. There is a story, you'll have the assignee to it, and you have a reviewer. And you get to choose who the reviewer are. So that, at least what I went, because I was some of the reviewers sometimes, and what you do is you get the as-needed pair programming happening. I know Rick is going to review my code. Might as well just call him in the middle of the week and say, hey, here's what I'm trying to do. Here's how I'm testing it. And that introduced, so you can make pair programming a necessary thing, practice, or I found it to be encouraged if you do the code review. So this is what I wanted to talk about, and you had a question. I think this is slide before the last.
So yeah, you say dedicated product owners and subject matter experts. What does dedicated mean? Are they sitting with the team full time? Do they come in every day for the stand up?
So dedicated is true. It's part of the team. So they're a team. So when you put an org chart for the team, the product owner's name is there. There's that, but the ownership part included 2 things. It included the road mapping. I can dream anything for the application, and I'll work with the architect, the STM, and then. But at the same time, is that executive position. When you say this is what's going to be done, you're committing those resources for it. You come and change your mind, then you're changing the scope, you're changing what gets delivered. So now hopefully you own that user base for that application, and you can validate that. Well, my users want it this way. But you also have the responsibility, well, yeah, why didn't you ask them that or did the right thing before we so I think, yeah, this is basically, this is a summary of what I thought of as architecture-driven, at least practices or thoughts that I wasn't owning this. What I was doing, I was working with developers, technical leads, with the SDMs, with the director of the teams to say, this needs to be in your head. You need to own this. And if we do this, then we can make sure that quality is a shared responsibility. Architecture is a shared responsibility. Parting thoughts is, I can't emphasize this. I think in an Agile, a product owner, there's that responsibility. You get the freedom to choose what to build. But also with that freedom comes to something's got to give up. And then you have to put that responsibility. I have one statement that I took. I don't know who said it, but if it's a technology, no, if it's a decision you can make, it's a trade-off, right? It's an architecture thing. If it's a decision that you can't make, it's a requirement. And a lot of times, this guy here, product owner, and you said it, are very critical to architecture because you're trying to do trade-offs, and the product owner will do the veto. Well, I want it this way, or I want it at this time. And your architecture decision goes left versus right. So this is very, very critical. Architecture is successful. This is, yeah, you take any SEI book, you take any of those tools. It's going to only be successful if you make the environment for it successful. You have the skill set, you need the infrastructure, and it really doesn't matter which process, whether it's Agile or otherwise. At least that's what I found. Quality, visibility, I think I learned more than I needed to know, but the visibility of quality at each point of time is what's critical. So if you have Agile team that you have to work with, if you also equate architecture with quality, how do you make it visible? Not like in the foreseeable future, how do you make concrete, lightweight? Can I stop at lightweight? So testing, I learned more I needed to know about testing, but we talked about it across, over this. Testing is a very powerful tool to bring in your architecture, I think knowledge, architecture practices that you want to involve just within testing. Automation and testing can give you a lot of that. Again, you could still do the diagrams. You could do the just enough anticipation or a lot of anticipation. You build enough infrastructure, and you can actually operate on that agile fashion. So, this is my talk. This is time or this? Okay.